Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi and today I have the end of my Palkia adventure. So as you know, I've been pretty much maining Palkia for this entire format. I ran it in the USPA Major and got top 16. I ran it in the Victory Road tournament a few weeks ago and got top 4. And I also brought it to Salt Lake City Regionals. And this past weekend, I got top 32 at Salt Lake City Regionals with a slightly different variant of Palkia. What I think is now the best variant of Palkia. And I went 6-2. It was a little bittersweet because, so on one hand, I got my World Invite. I got championship points and just completed that quest to the World Championships, although I will keep playing at Regionals just because I enjoy it. I do have that locked up now. On the other hand, I lost my last round. And I was 6-1 going into round 8 and lost, and meaning I went from potentially top cutting to all the way down to top 32, which for me was really sad because now I am 0-6 in win-and-in games. So games that would either guarantee me top cut at a regional or guarantee me top cut into Players Cup Global Finals. And I've lost 6 in a row, dating back to 2017. On one hand, still happy that I got championship points, still happy that I did pretty well in the first regional of the season. On the other hand, man, that sucks. The other thing that you might notice is that this is the same team that top cut. These 6 same Pokemon, Zacian, Palkia, Incineroar, Amoonguss, Indeedee, Porygon 2, also made an appearance in top 4 with Alex Orant. And we're going to actually have him on the channel next week to talk about his variant. He told me that he found this team on ladder and thought that it was a cool idea and took it. And first off, I totally encourage that. If you see a cool team on ladder, you should absolutely steal it. On the other hand, it is a little funny that we just worked on this team and ended up coming to the same 6 Pokemon, even though I think he might have started with these same 6. And he did better than any of the people in my team building group with it. And we came to pretty different variants at the end of the day and had different lines into some of the common teams. But I do think our variant is a little better. I do think that we made one mistake in team building that I will talk about in a little bit, and we've rectified that in the rental code. But yeah, I think that these 6 are the way to play Palkia right now. And like I said, I won't do too many comparisons to Alex's team because we will have him on the channel next week, so we can kind of compare and contrast there a little bit more. But yeah, so going into the team itself. So as you remember last time that I had a Palkia team on the channel, the 6 were Zacian, Palkia, Incineroar, Amoonguss, same 4. I think those 4 are pretty much mandatory on Palkia at this point. And the last 2 were Ditto and Thundurus with safety goggles, like special Thundurus. And so those were the 6, that I got top 4 in Victory Road with. And I wanted to try to fix that team to be a little bit more robust, a little more favorable into the metagame. So I asked myself, what was I losing against? And the answers were a few things. First off, Goggles Thundurus was just an absolute menace. I could not beat that consistently. It was so hard to play against. Similarly, Goggles Zapdos was also a little bit of a problem, just because Eerie Impulsing Palkia early game, you didn't really have ways to deal with it. It just it was very, very tough. The next thing was Calyrex Shadow with Indeedee specifically, meant that you couldn't use your own Goggles Thundurus to beat it. Now you could Ditto through it. And I did manage to do that in ladder a lot, but I played an NPA set against G-Sock Lee, Maluka, who is one of the best players in the world. And he absolutely bodied me just by understanding that my win condition was Ditto, and he kept speed control whenever I had a chance to switch in Ditto, and I just never got any momentum because of that. And so I was convinced that we needed a better matchup into Calyrex Shadow. The third thing was, weirdly enough, it was Swordfish, because in that Victory Road run, as you know, if you watch my team report, my 2 losses, one in Twist was to Agati, who was running a team very similar to what Aaron Trailer used, and the second was to Joe, who won the tournament with a pretty standard Swordfish build as well. And I just recognized that, okay, I did go 3-2 in the tournament against that team. It was a slightly favorable matchup, but that was the best team leading up to the tournament, not necessarily in the last week, but leading up to the tournament, that was the team to beat. And so I really wanted to make sure that we didn't lose to any of the variants of it, which is why we made some of the changes that we did. And then finally, Rinya Sun, the Sun team that Chungjun used and Joe UX9 used in the tournament that got first and top 4. That was the other team that I felt like we needed to beat. And in the last week of the tournament, going up to the tournament, this was like absolutely the team to beat. We knew that we were going to be facing it, and we had to build our team specifically to beat this team and make some concessions against some other teams in the process. And so that was the list of priorities that we had in team building. And so I guess jumping into the Pokemon themselves, so the changes were I added Porygon 2 and Indeedee to the team. I guess I shouldn't say I worked on this team with Gavin, Michaels, Elisa, and Biosai. We were the people who put this together. All of us brought this to the regional. Justin Burns was also going to bring it to the regionals, but he sadly couldn't make it because of a flight delay. And sadly, none of those players actually got championship points with the team. It was just me. We all lost round one, which is a little sad. And I do think that like part of it was the concessions that we made, because again, we were really focused on Swordfish, Calyrex Shadow, and the Rinya Sun matchup, and we kind of disrespected the like broader metagame and didn't realize like how much random stuff we were going to face. And so my round one loss was to a Reshiram team, which would have been completely alleviated if I had Max Wormwind, not completely alleviated, but would made a little more playable if I had Max Wormwind on Palkia. As a cohort, we faced a lot of Ferrothorn, and as you might notice, we dropped Sacred Sword. These slashes there are because we really were supposed to keep Sacred Sword. And I actually beat both the Ferrothorn that I faced. I didn't think it was that problematic, but I also faced a Dialga, and I also beat the Dialga. So, I don't know. It was tough, though. It was very tough, and they ended up losing a lot more to it, played a lot more of it, and kind of bad luck. And then Gavin was the closest to getting points, and he started at 0-1 and then played Aaron Trailer at 0-1, who obviously got second place at the regional, so that was also a bad break. He said the matchup was really close, but Aaron had Safeguard Indeedee, as you might have realized, and that was also just a problem for him. And so still winnable. Again, we hedged the Swordfish matchup so hard in our favor, but he had a lot of tools like Kartana that we didn't have Sacred Sword for, and Safeguard Indeedee that made it a lot tougher. And that's kind of just the back and forth, right? Honestly, Aaron was talking about in his like AMA on Reddit that he had really game planned for the Palkia matchup, and so I think that a rematch might have been, with the information that we had, might have been more manageable, but it is what it is. And so, yeah, so I guess going into the changes, so Porygon 2, obviously, really, really good into Calyrex Shadow, and I also thought that we needed it for Rinya Sun. I was not a huge fan of Porygon 2 in general, but when Gavin really liked it. Gavin was playing the team very differently from what I was doing, and he was abusing Porygon 2 a lot more, and so and this is his set, I did not think about the EV spread at all. I was using it for exactly 2 matchups. And so again, that was Calyrex Shadow. Obviously, it's phenomenal there. No dispute. It does a lot. Also, into Sun matchup, we needed it to set Trick Room up so that the Charizard, when it started to get rolling, didn't overpower our team. And I'll talk about the specifics of the Sun matchup a little later. And then the Indeedee obviously was there for Goggles Thunderous. Also there for Rain. Because Rain, what they were doing was they were obviously really abusing first off, the Inks team that I faced in Victory Road did have a Thunderous on it, so that was another way that they could deal with it. But also, they were trying to abuse Rillaboom a lot, and this is just another way to stop Rillaboom, and another way to just like force their Kyogre to not be a Pokemon. Because essentially you're just saying like, okay, you can't really deal with my redirection with single target moves. You're gonna have to hit it a lot. The moves that you're using to hit Indeedee do not hit Palkia, right? If you're Behemoth Blading Indeedee, you're not hitting Palkia. If you're play roughing Palkia, then you're not hitting Amoonguss. So they have to play a lot of mind games there. And then if you have a Kyogre and you're trying to click spread moves into our Pokemon, you don't hit Amoonguss and you don't hit Indeedee. And so this is also redirection into Rillaboom, which is really common. Turns off grassy terrain. Those were all really valuable, along with, of course, being really good into the Thunderous. And then finally, we also put Blizzard on Palkia. That was also both for the Sun and Rain matchups, because Gastrodon, obviously becoming more common, you want to be able to change weather a lot into the Rinya Sun matchup without having to worry about the Gastrodon. And you also wanted to hit all the grass types. You wanted to hit Amoonguss, which can be a little bit of a problem for this team, or the traditional version of this team. Are like changes both by putting in DD, by putting Blizzard on Palkia, made Amoonguss a lot less of a problem. And then you want to hit the Rillabooms, you want to hit the Kartanas for a little bit more damage, stuff like that. We thought was really valuable. This was mentioned by Z. She was using this in NPA and talked it up, and we were like, this makes a lot of sense. And then the other reason for Blizzard was because we had a problem with focus sashes, weirdly enough. I think that focus sash is maybe the best item in the game right now. And Palkia weirdly had a problem with it because none of your other Pokemon do damage and you don't have a spread move. And so normally the way you deal with a focus sash mon is you either set up residual or set up like weather, which is what we were doing, or you just hit it with a spread move and you get some value out of breaking the sash and being forced to two-shot something. But we didn't have any spread moves. And that's just like an inherent problem with Palkia teams. Blizzard wasn't really being used because it was a spread move. It was being used because you could start a hail with Max Hailstorm and just straight up OHKO things like Sash Whimsicott, break sashes on things like Calyrex or whatever has a focus sash. Just I think that generated a lot of value for us, whereas otherwise you're not really attacking with Indeedee. You're not attacking with Porygon 2 or Amoonguss or whatever. So you don't really have a great way to break sashes with your support Pokemon while your heavy hitters are targeting down things that don't have 1 HP. Because it feels really bad to have to click a max move into something that has 1 HP, So that was kind of the idea there. Blizzard, absolutely worth it. Alex did not run Blizzard. I thought Blizzard was an absolute game changer for the team. Would recommend trying it out. So I guess going through the individual Pokemon, like I mentioned, the Porygon 2 is pretty standard. Did not really think too much about the set because it was kind of a Gavin thing in terms of the nature, the move slots. Foul play, obviously you need to hit the Calyrex Shadow. I guess you could run Shadow Ball, but this also lets you hit Indeedee. It means that you aren't reliant on your attack stat, and it lets you hit Solgaleo, I guess, which was a little more common than we expected. I don't know. It didn't need to be foul play, but it was just because it meant that you didn't have to invest anything in your attacks. Eerie Impulse, again, really, really important, especially because we dropped Sacred Sword, which meant that you need to hit things like Dialga and drop their special attack stat. I mean, this is just like a pretty standard Porygon 2. I don't really have much to say about it, and I don't really know, or rather, I think that maybe the EV spread could have been optimized a little bit, but it didn't really come up, and I did like Bold. It meant that we could take a lot of attacks on the physical side, and then either Eerie Impulse on the special side or Max Quake on the special side. And then moving on to the Zacian, as you might notice, the Zacian is the really bulky set that I ran in Victory Road. That one had 4 speed EVs. I speed crept that a little bit, by 1 point, just because I didn't want to lose to my own Zacian. I don't know if it was getting popular. I know Agati ran a 4-speed Zacian in the IC. His team got leaked, and so I was like, well, I should probably speed creep that in case he's sharing it with any Americans or anything. And so yeah, so it was a Behemoth Blade, Play Rough, and then we ran Substitute instead of Sacred Sword, and that was the biggest mistake we made, just because Substitute is really good in Trick Room. Right, your opponent is trying to stall out their Trick Room turns, and you are very often just you don't want to just attack into protect, so you want to click Substitute to generate some advantage while your opponent is either pivoting into their Amoonguss or just in general trying to stall out Trick Room. And so that was a lot of value. It also is really good when you're ahead, but man, Sacred Sword is so important. We played so many Ferrothorns between us, and so many. I faced a Dialga. Honestly, I beat the Dialga. I beat both Ferrothorns I faced. It wasn't that big of a problem, but it was still something you have to play very carefully around when Sacred Sword makes that matchup really free. Substitute is a lot better in other matchups, but we maybe didn't respect Rogue enough. And this tournament, you might have noticed, had a lot of jank. Sacred Sword also really important into Solgaleo, into Duskmane, stuff like that. Originally on the team, I had Sacred Sword over Play Rough. And then Substitute as the last slot in the IC. And I went 23-3 in the IC. I finished 1770 something. And I couldn't play the last day, so 26 games overall. But I did lose to a Dracovish, where I just could not hit it because with the Zacian in the end game, because it didn't have Play Rough, and that sucked. And when we dropped a Dragon move on Palkia, we needed a way to hit Dragon, so we didn't have that. So Play Rough did feel really mandatory. Sacred Sword, again, we can drop because we didn't have an Incineroar problem because we had a Palkia, and so it was okay if you didn't get to OHKO Incineroar or do 80% to Incineroar. That was fine. But it really was just the Ferrothorns and the Dialgas that we needed Sacred Sword for. And so in hindsight, I would change that. And then Indeedee had Mystical Fire to help a little bit with Ferrothorn. Really didn't do enough damage. Helping Hand is way better if you have Sacred Sword. So those are the 2 changes that I would make. And I think that if you make those changes, you have the best Palkia team possible for this metagame right now, at this moment. But we didn't run that, and that just is what it is, right? So the rental code that I will show you will have the changes, Sacred Sword and Helping Hand. So That's the Zacian. Again, no speed control, so we just didn't need to be fast, and the Thunderous game plan didn't require you to outspeed it. Although maybe we disrespected Kartana a little bit, and in the future you might have to go up a little bit. Although I really do think that like having really, really bulky Zacian is insane. Even though it never actually came up for me, it could have come up for me. I lost my Winnernin on a roll on Zacian, or I lost game 1 on a roll, where I had a chance to live another Zacian Behemoth Blade after 2 turns of Wildfire. And if I had done that, for example, then all of a sudden the bulk is just incredible. And so, yeah, Palkia, again, Blizzard over Wormwind, otherwise pretty standard. And then also, in the past, I had been saying, just run max modest. There's no reason not to run max speed, because you want to speed creep all the things that are hitting 149 speed, 150 speed to outspeed Caloric Shadow, outspeed Zacian at +1. But nowadays, everything is going faster than that, right? You have to go timid Kyogre, and so you have to go timid Zapdos, and you have to go timid Landorus, and you have to go timid Yveltal, all because Kyogres are going max speed now. And so in that case, there's no reason to run 152 speed. People are speed creeping that. Also, people are just know that people are running max speed modest Palkia, and so they're speed creeping 152 as well. And so with all that in mind, we're like, well, in that case, we might as well drop down beyond 149, because we don't have a speed control on the team. Might as well drop all the way down to 143 to outspeed modest Kyogre, and make sure we get Quakes off before that. Also, Adamant Groudon, if for some reason you're running max speed there. We might have put an extra point to speed creep into that. I forget exactly what we ran. And then 2852 defense, or 28 HP 52 defense, lets you live a Zacian Play Rough, and then also take a turn of Life Orb and a turn of Hail Chip, and then I believe a second Life Orb chip, it might have been a second Hail Chip, while you are Dynamaxed, which, you know, didn't technically come up, but like those lines do come up in some occasions, and so it was nice to have that assurance that we would live that. That is from like max Jollyzation. I think that if they're Adamantization, then they probably just do too much to you. But you have that extra bulk, you might as well put it somewhere useful. That was kind of what we decided to do with it. So that's the Palkia. Pretty standard, nothing too special other than Blizzard, which again, really think is very powerful on this team because it has a problem with focus sashes, and because the Kyogre teams are so reliant on grass types to beat you, and then also because Rinja Sun requires you to change the weather in front of a Gastrodon occasionally. In terms of Incineroar, I think this is the exact same Incineroar that I ran. There is an argument to drop the Dark move that you don't really need as much anymore for something like a Taunt, something like Protect, I guess, something like Snarl. But honestly, the Incineroar did Incineroar things. I didn't really ever feel too bad about what I was running. The one thing I will say is that Life Orb Zard is a 6.3% chance to KO with max Airstream. And in my Winnernin, in Game 3, Joe UX9, who I faced in the Winnernin, did get the roll on my Incin, and it sucked. It wasn't necessarily game determinative, but it put me way behind in a situation where normally, having flowcharted out those lines, it is a pretty even game state. I mean, sometimes you get those rolls, but there's an argument to run run a little bit more special defense on it just to make sure that never kills. The defense, I believe, lives a Zacian Sacred Word 100% of the time, and so that's like pretty valuable too. I don't know, it's weird. Like I don't feel bad about this spread. I think it's fine. I think this is like still my default Incineroar spread, and I don't think that unless you have Taunt, the speed investment comes up at all. So pretty happy with this. The Porygon 2, again, I talked about that. The Indeedee was Psychic Seed, and the Amoonguss was Focus Sash. So the reason for this, Focus Sash is just the best item in the game right now. You have to put it on your team. I did not have a Focus Sash on the Victory Road team, and I was like, I don't know why I'm not running a Focus Sash. Focus Sash is just an incredible item. And so I did opt to put a Focus Sash on this variant, and I put it on the Amoonguss, because at the end of the day, yes, you take more damage from like max Airstreams, which otherwise you like live pretty comfortably with Koba Berry, and now you're going down to 1 HP. But on the other hand, now you live max Flares or Fire Punches or whatever. You also live like +1 Behemoth Blades or +2 Behemoth Blades, which should come up once. You get to live stuff like Ice Rider attacks, and it guarantees Spore them. Just like all sorts of random stuff that does come up. And at the end of the day, it's really easy to get your Focus Sash back because of Regenerator. So you can Protect, take a max move, switch out, switch back in, and you have your Focus Sash available. And it's great. So Sash and Amoonguss was really clutch all weekend. Really like the set. The EVs kind of don't matter because you have a Focus Sash, but they're all invested in bulk because why wouldn't they be? And the IVs, as per usual, are there to underspeed the Calyrex Ice. but while still being as fast as physically possible, just to win, like, I don't know, Amoonguss endgames potentially, or get to seed bomb before your opponent gets to pollen puff or something like that, which, could come up. Also, funnily enough, a lot of Gastrodons are hitting this speed stat, and so sometimes you speed tie Gastrodons. And I had a match in testing, not in the tournament, but a match on Pokemon Showdown where it came down to an Amoonguss Gastrodon speed tie, where I seed bombed it before it could Ice Beam, but in the past it had Ice Beam before I could seed bomb. So that does come up sometimes, very funny, but there's no reason to go min speed, in my opinion. But there is a very good reason to underspeed Calyrex. And so seed bomb is the attacking move. We considered Pollen Puff. Actually, Biosai ran Pollen Puff at the tournament. I thought that Gastrodon would be more popular on teams that weren't Sun teams. Obviously, Charizard kind of invalidates Amoonguss, so it's hard to bring Amoonguss into Sun. Although, honestly, now that they're not Lumberry, now that they're Chardy Berry or Life Orb, you maybe could bring Amoonguss into Sun. Maybe you need to reconsider that. But Seed Bomb is just a way to hit Gastrodons that are on like Evoltal team, for example, or Calyrex Shadow Groudon teams that were popular for a while. It also is a way to hit Kyogre, especially like Combine or Assault Vest Kyogre, and that's why you run Seed Bomb over like Giga Drain, because Gastrodon often max, and they click Max Quake, and then Kyogres click Combine or have AV a lot of times. Not always, but it's nice to happen. Nice when it does happen, and I actually did beat a Combined Kyogre because I had Seed Bomb. That matchup was just, man, that was the toughest matchup of my entire weekend, other than the losses, obviously. So yeah, that's why the Seed Bomb. Z also ran Seed Bomb in her team that got top 8, and she'll talk about it more in our team report as well. And so, in DD, last but not least, same, and this is just like a pretty standard stat. You just run Max Bold with Psychic Seed. Psychic Seed was really cool because you get that Spadef boost into rain teams, and then now they just never get to do anything against it with Kyogre or with any of their special attackers like Zapdos, for example. And then Max Quake boosts it up even further, so they like really never get to KO the Indeedee unless they put Zacian on the field, at which point it is being threatened by a Palkia. So I like that a lot. Again, we ran Mystical Fire because we didn't have Sacred Sword. If you run Sacred Sword, then you run Helping Hand instead because you don't need to hit Ferrothorn anymore. And also it does so little damage to Ferrothorn that's not even worth it, honestly. And then the rest of the set is pretty standard. I mean, obviously, like Aaron ran Safeguard. I liked Protect a lot. Protect is really good. It allows you to play mind games, allows you to like protect in front of attacks that obviously have to go into Indeedee, especially like Indeedeezation, for example. Your opponent wants to click a dark move into Indeedee, and they can't because you can just protect it, but they can't click the dark move into Zacian and say you have to redirect it. And honestly, even Palkia doesn't really care about taking dark moves that much. If you are taking a Max Darkness from Evoltal and hitting it back really hard, then follow meing and hitting it and just KOing the Evoltal, that's not an awful trade to make. And if they miss target, they lose the game. And that's kind of a way, for me, in my opinion, to like skill diff people, if that makes sense. Like, good players are better at playing around redirection, and this team just has double redirection. And honestly, you bring double redirection to a lot of matchups and just say, I'm going to trade damage. My heavy hitter is going to hit your Pokemon, and you're going to hit my Pokemon, but I can choose which Pokemon you're hitting, and you can't. And so that's how I'm going to win games. And honestly, that was a mode that worked really well. I liked it a lot. You don't always bring double redirection. Sometimes you pick and choose. But this was a pretty cool mode that I liked a lot. Yeah, and so that's just the Indeedee, pretty standard. In terms of the matchup spread, I think that into Kyogre, what I'd normally do is I would lead Palkia Amoonguss or Palkia Indeedee, depending on the team, and then have the other redirector in back and Zacian in back, and literally just play double redirection. Palkia is going to do too much damage. They don't have a way to hit Palkia through redirection because their spread move sucks against it, and so I'm just going to power through, and most of their attacks don't do enough into Amoonguss or Indeedee to like outdamage me. And then Max Hailstorm means that they just like sometimes you have to make a read because like yes, they can do the thing where they switch the fire type into the grass type or the grass type into the water type, and you have to kind of call the slot. But on the other hand, you can usually make pretty safe plays, especially when you take one KO. Then they really don't have safe plays anymore. And so yeah, that's just kind of the way I approach the rain matchup. It generally worked pretty well. Also, those teams are generally pretty weak to Spore. Although again, Aaron did have Safeguard and DD, so be aware of that. That does change the math a little bit. You're also allowed to bring Porygon 2 into that matchup, especially depending on the variant. E-Impulse is really good. Obviously, Trick Room can be really good if they are really adamant about outpacing you. But I liked the double redirection lines into it. I also faced 0 Swordfish all tournament, but I was farming it on ladder. So, I don't know. The Sun matchup was the other matchup that was just like really, really important. Sun without Gastrodon is free. I did face one player who did that and just like bodied them. I didn't. I faced another Sun, which is a Reshiram Sun, and I lost that. But we'll talk about that in a minute. The Sun matchup, the Rinya Sun that Joe used, that Chungjin used, I faced Joe in my win-in, like I mentioned. That matchup, we flow charted the absolute living. I mean, we had to practice that a lot. We tried a lot of different slots in like the Porygon 2 slot to see if we could fix it. Like Landorus did not do enough in that matchup, even though you'd think it would. And so the game plan was, turn 1, you lead Incineroar Palkia, and they lead Groudon Charizard. They either go for Airstream into Palkia and Precipice Plays, and your Incineroar lives because of Shock Berry, and you get the parting shot off onto the Charizard, or they double the Incineroar and you should live, and then they have to Precipice Plays, and of course they do kill you with that, but you don't get the parting shot off. But Hailstorm is a roll to KO Groudon. And so it's an unfavorable roll to KO Groudon. It's slightly more favorable if they have after the Hailstorm chip, but still not in your favor. But that's okay because obviously they have to like switch it out immediately, or they switch out the Groudon into Gastrodon to try to catch you clicking Max Geyser, which also is fine because you're getting a ton of damage into Gastrodon and you're getting your parting shot off and you're turning off the Sun. And that was the most important thing because once you turn off Sun, then you can go into Porygon 2 and click Trick Room. And now the Charizard is basically gone. It does not do anything for the rest of the game. And then what we found was that you don't actually get to stack boosts. The most important thing you can be doing is clicking Hailstorm and just getting damage off with Palkia. You don't ever click Max Geyser unless you're really confident, because even though Geyser is better, it does mean that you no longer have the... you're just like playing it to Gastrodon. And so if you know they don't have Gastrodon, then you do it. Or if you just like have the read on them, you do it. But most of the time you're just clicking Hailstorm because it does a lot of damage anyways, and it's making sure that Sun never really comes up, and it's just really safe. Also, it does more damage in Sun to Groudon specifically, not into Charizard. So that's the line that we had, and then you do usually have to make a read turn 2. You might have to make a read later in the game. Like it ends up being even once you get to that point, but like the reality is, unless you did that exact play, you were losing. And so the way my matchup against Joe worked was game 1, we did that, and he turned out he didn't have Gastrodon in back, and he likes not bringing Gastrodon. I think that's just wrong. I think you bring it anyways, and I think he found out game 3 why you bring Gastrodon. I'll talk about that in a minute, I guess, but we did the whole thing, and it came down to 2 things. So first off, the end game was Grimmsnarl and Zacian on his side in Trick Room versus my Incineroar and Zacian. And Zacian had taken 2 turns of Wildfire at this point. And so I say, okay, this is a 50-50, right? He can either side Scary Face, go before my Zacian, and there's 2 turns of Trick Room left. So he can either side Scary Face, go before my Zacian, KO my Zacian, and then protect the last turn to outspeed my Incineroar and KO the Incineroar. Or if he does that and I protect the Zacian and I Flare Blitz with Incineroar, then I always win the game, because then I can substitute in Flare Blitz and win that way. Or, alternatively, he can just protect with his Zacian, in which case, if I go for the protect with my Zacian and Flare Blitz, then I get nothing out of it, and he gets to do the same thing next turn, right? And so, in that sense, it was a 50-50 in my head. Maybe it was like... So, the other confounding factors were that he didn't know that I was super bulky Zacian, although he maybe could have inferred it if he had seen my team report. So I thought that Behemoth Blade was a roll onto my Zacian. I didn't have a calculator in front of me like I normally do, and if I had, maybe I would have made a different play, but I went back and calced it, and assuming he is just the standard Jolly Zacian, then it is a 75% chance to KO after 2 turns of Wildfire chip, which also just speaks to the absurdity of Wildfire. But, and so I was like, okay, so if I called the 50-50 wrong, then I still have a 25% chance of living this attack and winning the game. In hindsight, I probably should have protected. I mean, in hindsight, I should have protected, right? But I did call it wrong. He got the Behemoth Blade off. It did get the roll and KO'd my Zacian, and so I lost that game weight 1. But like that's kind of how the type of endgames that you turn into, where by making this like very linear line, you almost always end up turning it into a 50-50 type situation, where you just have to call one turn correctly. Game 2, he just did not bring the right Pokemon. He led Grimmsnarl, and I showed him why like my lead will beat any lead that isn't exactly Groudon Charizard. Right? Again, this is a matchup that we practiced and like a ton. In game 3, he brought Gastrodon, and he did get the roll on Incineroar, which actually mattered because it meant that single target press was placed into Palkia, which put Palkia in Earth Power range from Gastrodon after an Eerie Impulse from Porygon 2, which basically meant that I didn't get a chance to get a second max move off with Palkia, which I think would have made the difference in the game potentially, or at least would have put that in that game state where it is a potential 50-50. And instead, he just got to yawn me a bunch with Palkia. At the end of the day, the problem with that matchup is not the Charizard, although Charizard is obviously crazy. It is that we have no ground resists on this team, and that team has 2 ground types, and that's just too much damage. The Gastrodon and the Groudon both get to like clean up really well in the end game just by clicking their attacks and not really having anything to stop it. So like Porygon 2 is essentially our ground resist, and that's just not enough, obviously. So that's kind of the problem with the matchup. And then like the end game was basically like I KO'd the Gastrodon, but he got 2 yawns off in Trick Room. And so he just had a Zacian into my Porygon 2 that was at full health and my Zacian. And the Zacian had to like protect on the last turn of Trick Room or whatnot because I made the read to KO's Gastrodon. Or not the last turn of Trick Room, I forget. Anyway, so it came down to like I needed 2 one-turn wakes in a row to win the game. And I just obviously like that's just so unlikely to happen. I didn't get it, and so it's what it is. Not going to complain about not getting 2 one-turn wakes. I am a little miffed about the like 6.3% roll that he got, but I mean at the end of the day, like that matchup is not in our favor unless we have to like it's not in our favor inherently, and we have to like play it really perfectly, and then make a read on top of that. And if you look back at like the way Alex played against Chungjun, obviously he did not have Blizzard, he had Wormwind, and that kind of made the matchup very different for him, but he kind of got bodied in top 4 by that team. So, and so, I mean, honestly, that's my argument for like why our variant is better than his variant, although, I mean, that's totally debatable, totally like a meta call, and you just changing a few flex spots, but like, at the end of the day, like I played our worst matchup in the win and lost to it, and then he played it in top 4 and lost to it. And like, if you just like swap positions in that round 8, then we're probably sitting on opposite sides of the table. So yeah. So that's the toughest matchup I think in general. You saw Alex lose to it, you saw me lose to it. It was tough. It was just tough, and even though we practiced it, even though we knew exactly what we were doing, it was still just like it came down to reads. Okay, enough about Sun. And then the next matchup that we like practiced was the Calyrex Ice Palkia matchup because that was like the flavor of the week coming into the tournament. Obviously, it did not do very well at the tournament. The only like top 32 placer with it was Wolf, and Wolf could take Farfetch'd to top 32. In fact, he has taken Farfetch'd to top 32. So like, it sounds like the team kind of fell off a little bit. And so we decided, the way we planned this out was we were going to do Palkia, Amoonguss, P2, Zacian. Incineroar is kind of bait apparently, and DD is also apparently bait. I did not actually participate in this testing. I just like read our matchup guide basically. But I trusted like that the game plans that my friends had come up with was going to be good. And essentially what they said was like, you need to continuously put pressure, make sure they don't ever get a free switch into Ice Rider. They can set up Trick Room, but as long as they don't get the free switch and they're constantly under pressure, then it's not like a ton of value for them. Spore is also really, really good in that matchup. You really need to abuse Amoonguss as much as possible, and the Sash puts in work against Ice Rider as well. And then Incineroar again is kind of bait. You don't actually get to like effectively intimidate the Ice Rider, and then the Palkia as well is you to play rough it at some point, but you usually don't get to do that until later in the game. And so you do have to play very assertively. It's easy to fall into the trap of playing conservatively in that matchup, but you do have to play very aggressively without like necessarily making reads. Just like make sure that they don't get to make reads essentially. And that's kind of that matchup. Those were the matchups we prepped for. I was a little scared of Yveltal coming into the tournament because the team that Z used, that was originally I think Snow's team, was popping up here and there, and we're like, we probably got to beat this team at some point. None of us faced it. I did face 2 Yveltal, and honestly, the matchup against Yveltal is just Amoonguss is really good. That's all there is to it. You have Sash and Amoonguss. They don't really have great ways to deal with Amoonguss other than hitting it with Yveltal. But if they're hitting it with Yveltal, they're not doing anything else with Yveltal, and Yveltal is being asked to do a lot. they don't have ways to like deal with redirection, and so like Zacian can put pressure on it. They have to double target the Amoonguss, which is a big investment for them, especially since you can just protect it, right? And then if they don't double target it, then you just spore and you get rid of the Eviltal slot and you win the game. So I faced 2 Eviltal in my run, including the Kevin Bisping, I think, who got top 16 with it, and legitimately none of them were even remotely problematic. Kevin, the game 1 did come down to a sleep turns a little bit, but game 2 just not close at all. And I mean, he did really well with the team. So obviously, like, I think that this was just a favorable matchup and not just like people playing poorly. And then, yeah, I guess those were the matchups that we were really concerned about. The mirror was similarly like a little weird because we didn't have Wormwind on Palkia, but in general, Amoonguss is so good into the mirror, and then Substitute is so good into the mirror because they have to like fire off attacks into Zacian trying to KO it, and if you set up a sub, then they have to start clicking Wormwind into the partner slot, which is a lot less good, especially since Playoff is still doing a ton to Palkia. And so that was the approach to the Palkia matchup in general, just abuse Amoonguss. But we did need Playoff for it. When you don't have Playoff, Palkia is just impossible. That was another one of my losses in the IC, was just like a Palkia that I couldn't deal with. But yeah, Amoonguss just so important, and that's why we put Blizzard on the team, because the Palkia teams, traditional Palkia variants, do struggle against Amoonguss. So those are the like big matchups. Oh, Calyrex Shadow, you just have to like set up Spadef boosts with the Porygon 2. That's just kind of the matchup there. I didn't play it at all. It is probably a little more complicated than that, but I think that's just a general good answer to it. So yeah, those are the matchup spread. In terms of my tournament run, so round 1, I faced Tiffany Stanley, who I had never heard of, but apparently she is a really old school player, had been playing since like 2009, and made Worlds in 2016. So definitely a very talented player, even though she hasn't been playing more recently. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm glad that I had that information, because otherwise I saw that team in team preview. I thought I was facing an in-game team. It was Reshiram, Groudon, Umbreon, Articuno, Eliki, Kartana. And in hindsight, I could not have thought of a better counter team for my team. So, game 1, she leads Reshiram, Umbreon, and I think I just lead like Palkia and Didi, I think. And I'm like, okay, I know how to deal with this. The Reshiram has to Dynamax. As soon as it stops Dynamaxing, it's not going to do a ton other than clicking like maybe Heat Wave, right? And also, it doesn't really like taking play roughs either after its Dynamax is over, although obviously Behemoth Blade is not doing very much to it, whether it Dynamaxes or not. So my game plan was install the Dynamax, put Zacian in front of it, play rough it after it's taken some chip, and win the game that way. It was a good idea. It worked. I sufficiently stalled that the Dynamax, put my Zacian in position, and the Reshiram moved before my Zacian. It was Scarf Reshiram, and it just blue flared it and got rid of my Zacian, and the game was over. I just could not beat it. And then game 2, I was like, okay, well, I gotta play a little smarter. I gotta Dynamax my Palkia a little more proactively. I gotta get rid of this Umbreon if I want to max the Palkia. It turns out 2 things are true. First is that it is max speed Jolly Groudon, so it outspeeds my Palkia. And secondly, it is max speed or somewhat fast Articuno, which also outspeeds Palkia and has Freeze Dry, which KOs from like 80%. And so there is just no way that I can ever position Palkia into this, because Reshiram has Wormwind and outspeeds it. The Umbreon has Snarl and Yawn and just puts a ton of pressure on it. The Groudon outspeeds it and chips it away, and the Articuno can KO it and outspeed it. So Palkia was dead in this matchup, and man, it was such a tough matchup. I don't know if I can, like, in hindsight, maybe I need to like Porygon 2 through it. Maybe I need to like set up Trick Room and start sporing things. I don't know. That is not a matchup that I think I'm going to figure out in 2 games, and so I got dumpstered. It was not close, and that was not the way I wanted to start my first regional in 2 years, or 2.5 years. And then I go and I talk to everyone, like to all my friends, talk to everyone I talked about in team building, like Jeremy Rodriguez, who started out 0-1, Alan Martinez started out 0-1, Alberto Lara started out 0-1, all these Aaron Trailer started out 0-1. So many good players lost their first round. It was absurd. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to have to face like the gauntlet. Yeah, starting out at 0-1, there's going to be so many good players that I have to face. Turns out that I did manage to run the gauntlet. So round 2, I faced Zacian Palkia Mirror, and they did have Ferrothorn. and they had AV Ferrothorn, and I did manage to beat that. The trick against Ferrothorn when you don't have Sacred Sword is basically just like you have to either 1v1 it with Porygon 2 if they're not Iron Defense Body Press, or you have to like get damage into it and stick the damage if it's AV. And so something like Max Hailstorm, you're not necessarily doing a ton of damage to it, but every turn of hail is doing consistent damage to it that it cannot recover. So that was my game plan. And I got the Hailstorm off on the last turn of Dynamax, just slowly chipped it away. And then in the end game, you can either Mystical Fire it, or you can like Flare Blitz it, or whatever, but it just kind of dies. And so eventually you can deal with it. But you do have to like have a mod advantage at the end of the day. So that was that. It was just it was the flex spots were Pharaoh, Zap, Grim, and with Incineroarization Palkia, managed to beat that. I guess I probably shouldn't go through all the matches because that'll take a while. I faced a Rayquaza the next round, which was also not really a problem. I faced the first Evoltal Blastoise team. This was against the person who Wolf had just beaten on stream, and so I like got all the info from my friends who had been watching the stream before the round. I was like talking to my opponent while texting my friends, being like, "Yo, what was he using?" And then obviously the round starts, and it's like Blastoise Evoltal stuff, and I have all the information, so I get to win against that pretty easily. Round 5 was maybe the toughest matchup that I could have faced. I like looked at my opponent. My opponent was Darsh Patel, who I know has commented on my videos, so I know that he's watching this. But it was Kyogre, Grimmsnarl, Incineroar, Dialga, Ferrothorn, Landorus. And I looked at that and I was like, wow, my day is over. I cannot beat this team. Ferrothorn is such a problem with don't have Sacred Sword. Dialga is such a problem because we don't have Sacred Sword. I'm going to be in a world of pain. And I 2-0 him. And I'm just like, okay, this is bad. I have to lock myself in. I have to know exactly what I'm going to do. So here's what I have to do. First off, I figure out the Ferrothorn set. Because you play against Iron Defense Body Press, you need to Mystical Fire it, right? You don't have any other way of damaging it. You need to hope that with some chip damage, Mystical Fire will 2-shot it. If they are like a Leech Seed set that doesn't have Iron Defense, or if they are the AV set, then you're not doing enough with Indeedee. You have to just like 3v1 it, or you have to Timer Stall it with Porygon 2. Dialga, also a problem. You have to either out-damage it with Palkia by just like clicking Max Wake into it and getting rid of it in the early game, or you have to Porygon 2 it. Or you can Mystical Fire it, which is our original plan. But also, he doesn't know that I don't have Sacred Sword on Zacian, so he's probably going to play a little more conservatively game 1, and then game 2 he's going to bring both because he realizes I have no way of actually killing these things. Right, so that was what my plan was. Game 1, he leaves Dialga on the bench, which is maybe okay. And then Ferrothorn, I find out it's Assault Vest, but in the process of winning that game, I do win that game by just like putting damage into it slowly but steadily. But in the process of playing that game, I do reveal all of my moves on Zacian. So he knows that I don't have Sacred Sword at this point, if he's taking notes. In game 2, I'm like, okay, he's going to bring Dialga. There's no reason for him not to. And he's going to bring Ferrothorn. There's no reason for him not to. I need to KO one of them and then Timer Stall the other one with Porygon 2. That's my way of winning the set. And he opts not to bring Dialga again. Very strange. Probably a mistake, because Dialga would have been a problem. Also, this is a Combined Kyogre. And he maxes Ferrothorn in both games, and he puts Steel Spike boosts into it, which is pretty reasonable. But it turns out that Amoonguss still beats that because it has Seed Bomb. And so I just get to, like, game 1, he gets Steel Spike boosts, and I just have to chip away at the Kyogre as well. But eventually, like, just get to play rough it, get to Seed Bomb it, get to, I don't know. Game 2, I have a Porygon 2, so I also just don't worry about it because I get to Eerie Impulse it. And so that's kind of how I dealt with that. And then in the end game, I'm like, okay, you know, I'm just going to, like, end game with P2. I'm just going to Timer Stall this Ferrothorn because all the damage into it is permanent. Even though it has a knockoff, it's never doing 50% to my Porygon 2. I'm going to get it to a 1v1 and then click recover 16 times. And I do exactly that, and I win on timer. And so that's how I beat the worst possible matchup for this team without Sacred Sword on Zacian. And so round 6, I play Kevin, who of course got top 16 with Evoltal, and again, I just get to do Yawn stuff. I get to, not Yawn, with Spore stuff against it and kind of win that way. Round 7, I play Taylor Brinkerhoff, who's using Sun without Gastrodon and just body it because it doesn't have a switch into Max Geyser. Actually, game 2, he leads Venusaur, and I'm like, you know, if he wants to click Sleep Powder, he can click Sleep Powder. That's fine. Just do it. and then I click my moves, and he Dynamaxes the Venusaur, and I just KO it immediately with Max Hailstorm, and the game is over. But I honestly was just like, if you max Venusaur, that means you're not maxing Zard, and it means that you are like hoping I don't get a 1-turn Wake, and I get too much advantage out of if I don't have a way to play passively around that, other than like leading Indeedee and forcing him to sleep out of the Indeedee, which might have worked, but I didn't do that. Game 1 was also really funny in that set because he led Thundurus, and it was physical Thundurus. And I could tell it was physical Thundurus because he had a Grimmsnarl on the team too. And I led Palkia and Indeedee, again, to cover the Venusaur lead. And he just goes for Raw Crunch. And I don't max. I just say, it's fine. You can lead your Grim Thundurus. I'm going to protect Indeedee because you're never Spirit Breaking. You're going to set up screens. And I'm going to click Raw Blizzard. And I hit the Blizzard and Thundurus. I do miss the Grimmsnarl, but I hit the Blizzard and Thundurus, do like 80%. He chooses not to Dynamax, goes for Raw Crunch, because I think he wants to Dynamax later in the game. And I'm just like, well, this is like the type of thing where people just max their Palkia, but you don't need to. They're not clicking Spirit Break into Palkia when you have an Indeedee on the field, or an Amoonguss on the field. They often need to like play around redirection so they don't waste their Dynamax, and so you just get to play conservatively. And then I like switch out the Palkia at some point into Zacian while they like hit it with the Dark move. That might have been against Evil Tall. I don't remember. Anyways, I just get to like, by delaying my Dynamax by 2 turns, I won the game very easily. So that was kind of how that match went. Round 8 against Joe I've already talked about. But yeah, I ended up with an awful resistance. I was one of the lowest X2s, but I had such a close, I played a really close set against Joe where I could be very easily could have top cut tournament. That's my run. Let's see. Here's the rental code. So again, shout outs to Gavin, Elisa, Will, just everyone who helped me team build and prep, and just everyone who was there at Salt Lake that I got to talk to. I had a great time. I'm sorry that I couldn't like top cut with this team. I really wish I could have. I would have loved to have sent off Palkia the right way, but is what it is. And so in the future, I will be at Indianapolis Regionals. I will be at New Jersey Regionals. Vancouver is still a maybe. I'm trying to figure out a way to get there, but Milwaukee is a no. And then I'll be at North American Internet, so I'll have a lot of chances to see everyone. I had a great time meeting all of you viewers as well who I hadn't met before, as well as just like everyone who I hadn't seen in 2 years. It was a lot of fun. I just had a lot of fun, even though I didn't end up doing as well as I would have liked to. And like I said, this is the updated version of the team that has Sacred Sword, has Helping Hand, that I think is slightly better. I would encourage you to try it out. I do think this is the best possible version of Palkia at this moment. Obviously, the metagame changes over time, and you can consider as you go what you want to change, but there are 2 flex spots that you can do what you will with. These are just the Pokemon that I thought best deal with the metagame, and obviously Alex showed that those 2 Pokemon work really well as well. So thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this fairly long team report, but this is my this is the end of my Palkia journey, and I hope that you guys can progress this archetype further, and I don't know, maybe we'll bring it back at some point. Yeah, so like, comment, subscribe as per usual. Become a channel member if you want to really support the channel. Really appreciate it. Help me fund my trip to Vancouver, which is stupidly expensive. Fund my Pokemon addiction, and so yeah, that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you all later.